G'day, I'm Jono and I'm one of the Wine Blokes. Just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a winemaker. I studied winemaking, Bachelor of Agricultural Science, majoring in oenology, which is obviously wine science at Adelaide University. I've also got a business degree. I've worked at some good wineries in Australia, Petaluma in the Adelaide Hills, which is quite famous. Worked for Smithbrook Wines for 6 years as winery and vineyard manager. I've done a little bit of work overseas in Bordeaux, and the last couple of years I've just been travelling with my girlfriend, seeing a bit of the world, and working around the place as well. But we've just come back, and Smithbrook Wines in WA has been very kind to offer a bit of work over vintage, 5-6 weeks. And that won't start until about mid-February. It's just before New Year's here at the moment, so we've got about 6 weeks to go. And what I'm going to do is hopefully document most of it with video. So everybody who's sort of never seen vintage or been involved with a winery during the vintage period, hopefully I'll be able to provide a little bit of an insight. But right now I'm in the Adelaide Hills, so what I thought we would do is go down to one of the local vineyards. A good friend of mine owns a sort of a 30 or 40 acre vineyard. A little bit of Cabernet, a little bit of Chardonnay, and we can just walk through, have a little bit of a look and see where the vineyard's at, see how the vines are going and how the 2008 vintage is looking. So we'll go down there now and see what we can find. G'day, welcome to Wine Blokes TV. And as I mentioned, we're in the Adelaide Hills vineyard of Maximilian's, which is near Harndorf, obviously in the Adelaide Hills in South Australia. And with me, as I mentioned, we've got Paul, who's the owner, viticulturist and winemaker of Maximilian's, and also we have Rog and Sarah, who both work in the wine industry. Just tell us where about you've worked, and I know you've worked a little bit overseas and quite a bit around Australia as well.
I did about 6 years as a flying winemaker, working in Australia and Northern Hemisphere. 2 vintages in the Clare Valley at Paulette's, vintage in Margaret River at Voyager Estate, one at Shaw and Smith here in the Adelaide Hills, and outside of that I worked in Chile and Argentina, 2 vintages in Burgundy, a vintage in Bordeaux, and where else? One in Spain and one in Tuscany. So
you're a real flying winemaker.
Yeah, it was a good mix and a nice way to kill a few years. So.
I went to uni with Paulie as well, and also Rog. So this is Rog and Sarah, and both these guys work in the industry. This is the first time on camera, so it's also
Sarah's trying to keep cool.
Yeah, it's also New Year's Eve here, and it's about near on 40 degrees. Yeah, it's about 10 o'clock this morning, but it's going to be a really hot day. So
an ideal day for outdoor filming.
Yeah. So everyone's a little under the weather from Christmas and the holidays and all the rest, but we thought it's actually a really good time to look at the vineyard and see how the season's going, because the fruit's developed, as you saw before. So Rog and Sarah, just tell us a little bit about your experience in the industry and where you're working.
As Jono said, I went to uni with both Paul and Jono, and from there I went and worked at Shaw and Smith for 5 years up here in the Adelaide Hills also.
And that was working mainly with Sauvignon Blanc?
Mainly with Sauv Blanc and Chardonnay in particular, or Chardonnay and Sauv Blanc in particular, 2 of the varieties that do extremely well up here in the Adelaide Hills climate.
And the Shaw and Smith Sauvignon Blanc is considered
one of the best
benchmark in Australia.
Australian Sauv Blanc, so they've worked on that for that reputation for about 15 years.
Yeah.
I worked with them for 5 years, which was a great experience, working with Mark Shaw.
Yep.
And from there I went to a place called McWilliams, which is up in Griffith.
Yep.
Up in a huge wine producing region called the Riverina, which produces about 300,000 or 400,000 tonnes of grapes annually.
So from one extreme to the other.
From 1,000 tonnes to about a 35,000 tonne facility, which gave me a good perspective of the.
And you've also worked vintages overseas?
Yes, I've also worked, did one vintage in the Napa Valley at Saint Cyprès, and also a vintage in France at Chateau Cassin. And yeah, that's it for overseas ones. And then I went from Riverina, I went down to the Clare Valley, which is another small production place, which actually only produced about as many tonnes as McWilliams crushes. So it's only about 35 tonnes.
Yeah.
Of 35,000 tonnes of grapes. mainly specialising in Riesling,
Yeah.
Cabernet and Shiraz.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. And Saz, you've worked in some very big companies in Australia.
Absolutely. Orlando Wine's the biggest one.
And what were you doing there?
Grower liaison officer, so dealing with our grape growers.
Yeah.
Helping to organise vintage and the harvest of the grapes, and dealing with our grape growers throughout the growing season, so giving advice on viticultural practices and those sorts of things. And Orlando's taken me from the Adelaide Hills and McLaren Vale in South Australia up to New South Wales through the Riverina, where we did about 40,000 tonnes. And also we did a bit of work up there in the Hunter Valley, also in Mudgee, so some other boutique regions, and then back to South Australia to Eden Valley and the Clare Valley and Barossa. So quite a few different regions, focusing on different varieties and different growing techniques, I guess.
Fantastic.
Practices, yeah.
And how do you think the season's looking so far in Australia? This will be the vintage 2008, and you would have seen quite a few of the vineyards.
Yep. Generally things are pretty dry this year. The Adelaide Hills is a little bit lucky in a way. We've had fairly, not too bad rainfall up here, and things are looking fairly good this season. But generally regions like the Barossa, Clare, Eden Valley, rainfall's been very, very low, so there's not very much irrigation water to use.
And still not much recharge in the ground.
Yep, and it was a very dry winter, so vines were pretty stressed going into the season. But this vineyard's looking pretty good compared to a lot. But I think Adelaide Hills has fared a little bit better than some regions. So yeah, generally fairly dry, but there are some pockets around regions that have done fairly well. So I think it'll be a fairly varied season.
Up in the northeast in Victoria, they've had quite a lot of rain in the King Valley and areas like that. Mudgee's had quite a lot of rain, so there'll be some.
I think the Adelaide Hills growers, they're kind of it's quite forgiving for them. They're quite lucky, aren't they? Most years.
Yep.
Yes, it's certainly not too many bad years.
They're not relying as much on sort of runoff and dam storage for irrigation up here. It's a lot of bore water.
Yeah.
The bores seem to be holding up fairly well this season, so that's quite good.
Okay.
Eden Valley especially is reliant pretty much on surface water, so dam storage, and a lot of dams up there are pretty much empty. So but there has been some rain at the right times of the season this year, which has been quite lucky. But it's just a matter of whether the vines have got not enough vigour to finish off the fruit.
Yeah.
In February, March. So
And
I think it'll be a challenging vintage.
Just talking bigger picture, the wine industry in Australia and also a little bit around the world, I suppose, has gone through a bit of a consolidation period where there was excess fruit and excess wine all over the world, and it seems to have sorted itself out a little bit over the last 12 months. Just like to get you guys the thoughts on where the industry is now, and how do we avoid it in the future?
Yeah, I think that the industry has been saved a bit by the seasonal conditions. Last season we had a lot of frosts around the place, fires,
and drought,
and this year in a lot of regions there's a lot of drought as well.
Self-check by the environment.
So the environment's sort of done a bit of goodwill, I guess, by keeping the vintages a little bit lower than normal.
Yeah.
But things in general, there's still a bit of an imbalance within the Australian industry, where the majority of fruit is grown in cool climate regions, so the more premium regions, and the majority of the Australian wine produced, or the demand, is for the lower quality fruit grown in the warmer regions. So that imbalance is still very much present, but it's been assisted a little bit by seasons that we've had, so the drought and frost and those sorts of things. So that's just a matter of managing the quality of our wines and where we're marketing them, I guess, and promoting more value in the wine, I guess, and selling it for more overseas.
Yep.